Up next on Way of the Renaissance Man, will AI destroy humankind? And other lighthearted subjects. Welcome to the Way of the Renaissance Man podcast. This is a show about ideas, personal empowerment, and celebrating the rational life. Our goal is to help each other discover the tools needed to better focus our minds, integrate our thoughts with actions, and live the lives we really want. I'm your host, Jim Woods. That's the serious, yet playfully intriguing discussion I had with my friend, computer scientist, investor, and fellow Renaissance man, Robert Deadman. And yes, that is his real last name. Robert is one of those rare individuals who possesses a breadth of knowledge that he can eloquently translate into casual conversation, even about such advanced and interesting topics as the rise of artificial intelligence, or AI, and the potential benefits and dangers of this technology. In this wide-ranging conversation, Robert and I discussed the current state of AI and what the future holds for this ubiquitous technology. Topics here include such questions as, at what point will AI begin making its own decisions? How far away is this circumstance? What is the role of quantum computing in this question? Will AI actually have free will? When will the move from artificial intelligence become artificial sentience? Can we solve the so-called alignment problem of AI? And how can we really understand this concept? I absolutely love this conversation with the fascinating Robert Deadman, and at the risk of alienating my other guests, I must say that this was my favorite podcast yet, and I hope you think so as well. Will AI destroy humankind? And other little lighthearted subjects like that, with a genius friend of mine, with the real name of Robert Deadman. The Dead Man's Curve. What's up? How you doing, man?
Doing awesome.
Good to see you.
It's great to be here.
We've known each other for a few months now.
Yeah, six or 7 months. Yeah.
I met you at, just so people know, I met you at an investment conference where I was.
The Econo Summit.
It was. That was that post-election thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, the post-election thing, and we talked about you. I think you had heard my talk. And then you were like, hey, I recognize some of that stuff, you know. Mm-hmm. And then we started saying, oh, you told me what you started doing for, one of your main projects, and I had been familiar with that. And so we both have like a kind of a quantitative analysis kind of approach.
Yeah.
But you were doing the quantitative analysis before there was ever such a thing.
Before it was given the word.
Before they called it that.
Yeah, before they called it quant.
So you're like, and it also dovetails into like what's the hot topic now, which is artificial intelligence and programming. So we'll get to that ultimate question at one point, because I know you got views on that. So. Yeah. But first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
So
we're here at Freedom Fest 2021, and I always run into people that I know here, and as you guys all know, I only hang out with interesting people. So let's talk about something that I think is interesting to a lot of people, and that's the whole idea of computers, artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. And now you're like a pioneer in that kind of programming mathematics industry. Not so much directly AI, but I know you know how it works. And
well, I had done dabbling all back in the 80s, back when there was 8-bit computing, and at the time, the things that are general buzzwords right now were never heard of. So, for example, like neural networks, never been thought about in any general community. But that's actually where I kind of got started. Was I came across a paper from Bell Labs that had come out talking about, or written by a guy named Hopfield, and this thing called the Hopfield network, and it was all showing how a neural network could be built using amplifiers. And so I used this paper to build my first neural network back in about 1987, all with electronic parts. I didn't understand it very well. In fact, I honestly didn't understand it much at all. But it flashed and it looked really cool at the time, and it was my first real introduction to the concept of neural network where I could buy in and start learning the pieces from it.
I see. So you learned it, you use it as a learning tool.
Well, at the time, because I didn't know any better, and it was something that, in old school AI, we all had these concepts of what we thought AI should be. Most people have considered it from 2001 when they look at the HAL 9000, and something which is, as it states, it's meant to mimic, but really is meant to be interacted with, ask questions, and be a general AI.
I never thought about that. That's a good point, because I know, like, the kind of whole, like, I love that movie, and the idea of it having its own consciousness and evolving into its own consciousness is what people are talking about now.
Yeah,
that was Arthur Clarke back in the old school days.
And yet we're actually not going that approach at all for most of the stuff. At the time, that was what we considered artificial intelligence to be, was the idea of some kind of computer that was our friend. And we were told that they would be our friends. And of course, then in the mid-'80s, when we were talking about, well, what would it take to make a brain? And they were talking about building a computer the size of the Empire State Building, and it would just have to be this massive thing. And as we've developed more and more, we realize that it's not necessarily the computing power that's stopping us at this point from developing something like that. It's our own lack of understanding of the systems in which they're meant to represent. So, for example, it doesn't matter how much computing power you have, if you don't know how to write code for love or hate or emotion, you're not going to be able to get in any type of emotion. And it's not anything that we understand in any type of level.
Yeah, how can you write a code that's...
Yeah, we don't get it ourselves.
We don't even know how it works in our own selves.
And even more importantly, we don't actually agree on what that even means. And we don't agree on what artificial intelligence is.
Well, we don't even, we have a tough time defining intelligence in the world, actually.
Yeah, and a great example is that when you look at the movies, most people consider, when they see something like Good Will Hunting or something where you see a super intelligent person, what qualifies intelligence? And they're usually saying the ability to process information, a super memory, the ability to apply. It's like, well, these are things that computers have been doing for 20 years, and we don't consider them to be intelligent.
Yeah, my calculator can outdo any person in figuring out how to do something fast, but I wouldn't call it intelligent.
No, and then does that diminish our concept of intelligence for ourselves? Do we need to redefine what we think intelligence is?
Right.
And those are some of the big questions when going to the idea of a large-scale artificial intelligence. So what we've seen is that over the last 20 to 30 years, that the people who actually work in AI have come up with a whole different concept of what it is versus the people who believe that they understand what it is through watching movies. And we'll find that the idea of creating a general intelligence has kind of fallen to the side. That's not what people are working on anymore. Instead, what we're working on is tools that are artificially intelligent. Things that we can use, and there's a special subset. When we look at artificial intelligence in general, it's this wide area of research, but these days about 98% of the work is all focused on this really narrow area called machine learning. And the reason we spend so much time in there is because it's really easy to do, and it produces profitable results right now. And it's something that it's so easy. People are going up on Udemy and taking courses on how to do it. High schoolers can do it. The libraries are being provided to everyone for free. And so everybody can create
like an
these
open source kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And everybody keeps adding to this and creating more and more libraries that are all very powerful and very good. But they're all with a very narrow focus for when we think of AI. But like I said, so much is done there because you can get results and get profits now. And all these other areas that would add to the real concept of intelligence are being set aside because they're going to take a lot more work, a lot more understanding to be able to become usable. And why spend time doing 20, 30 years of research when we can get profits now?
Right. Yeah, I mean, the practical aspect of AI and of any kind of computer programming is to help you be more efficient and make more money.
And it's doing that, and it's doing that very well.
It's doing that in fields you wouldn't even think it's doing that. Automotive, AI, appliances, anything.
It applies, or I should say, it's integrated itself into almost every aspect of your life. You just don't know that it's there.
Yes. Well, that's what people are afraid of. they have this kind of fear, like, oh, the machines are going to take over, kind of thing, So.
You want to ask the question? I can tell right now.
I mean, I don't want to be taken over.
No.
Man or machine.
No.
No, but continue, because I think that's understanding it better is going to make us have less fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in some ways you should have fears, in some ways you shouldn't.
Yeah, okay.
When we consider the idea of our AI is going to take over, they already have. They're already there. The difference is right now the AIs are still being monitored and controlled by the human element.
Right.
And because of that, you run into a problem where is the human acting in a way that's benevolent, or is it acting in a way that's subversive? Because AI is so prevalent, it's happening both. It's all being used against you for marketing. It's all being used for collection. It's assembling all of your data, creating models.
It's amazing. Like the Facebook algorithms and things, and the Google ones, they know exactly what I want.
They do
before I even want it.
Yeah, and that's exactly correct. And it's specifically designed for that on purpose.
Yes.
So, but at the same point, they're also used to figure out whether what they're looking at on your chest is actually a tumor, or whether you actually have a condition that can be helped, and what are the likelihoods of it being a condition that wouldn't have been caught otherwise.
Right.
So they, again, are tied to whoever is using it. Like anything, any technology is just a tool.
Yeah, that's my opinion on it.
Yeah.
To me, as a layman, it's just a tool. Can be used for good or for nefarious purposes, depending on who's using it.
The question is, at what point does the tool start making its own decisions?
That's the point.
And
I think that's the dangerous thing, because if you think about like a sophisticated general intelligence. Now, I'm not sophisticated enough to know like how that would come about. I think that's probably a long ways away anyway.
It is a long ways away, and it's going to require a different change in technology. In my opinion, it's not going to occur with digital computers at all.
Okay.
Which gives us a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
Because all of our tools and all of our development are based around the digital.
What would be the next gen of that? Then?
Well, the next thing, which is what we'd have to worry about, would be the quantum computer. A lot of the things that happen, even in our own brains, happen at a quantum level. We have fields that are being generated, and people will make statements as to whether that does contribute or not to consciousness. We don't really know.
Yeah, consciousness is still the mystery.
It really is, but it's also something that if we bring in the quantum effects, then we can answer certain questions that we don't get otherwise. Things such as free will. Do we actually have free will? Well, if we work in a mechanical universe, then by definition we don't.
Right.
So how do we possibly have free will if it's mechanical? Well, if we go to a quantum level, that opens up the possibility of free will by having things that can be potentially truly random.
Right.
And therefore, if they can be randomized in that sense, or at least have that random component where they can't be predicted, and they're based on probabilities, we can then have direction to go in to create things.
Right.
So with that, if we go into the quantum computers, right now the way that they work is by dealing with quantum fields. The question is, at what point do we start creating quantum computers large enough that they're starting to create fields that we don't know what they're doing, and we don't know what's happening?
Yeah, once you lose control of the beast, so to speak.
And that's where we move from artificial intelligence to artificial sentience. And that's where you start having a concept of danger, because with the resources that we keep giving them, we keep wanting to bring in more and more information and have them have more and more ability to interact with the environment. So, like I said, right now we're not necessarily at a risk of that. That doesn't mean we're not at risk, because we still have people who are disingenuous going against us.
Right.
The only difference is that we feel better knowing that there's a person we can blame when something goes wrong. And when it becomes an artificial intelligence that's conducting the action, we don't feel we can blame anyone. We don't feel that we can sue a computer and somehow get the satisfaction that we want
Yeah.
Even if it happens in court, we still want someone to pay.
We want to find the person responsible. That's how
Right.
we
And
it's your fault.
what happens when what's truly responsible is something that doesn't feel pain, doesn't feel emotion, and yet somehow is able to completely destroy your life.
Right.
Those are really the concerns that we have, and they're legitimate concerns.
Is there? The thing is, I think that one of the problems is what the so-called alignment problem, right? So if this sentient kind of computing thing that has like power to make its own choices for what's good for itself, and if that's misaligned with humanity, then humanity's in trouble.
Well, and
but
and
how do
you
we
have
how
to
do we avoid
you have
that?
to assume you can't is the problem,
Yeah.
because again, with that concept of intelligence, where we're really not understanding it ourselves, what would ever make us believe that the intelligence that we create is going to be human?
Yes.
They're not. It's its own design. If it's going to be able to become self-aware, that means it's creating its own networks. We don't choose them anymore.
Do you think that self-aware factor is an inevitability at some point?
I would say yes. I don't think it's like I said, anything is imminent by any means.
Okay. What kind of time frame would you have to, if you had to peg it? I know that's a very hard,
it really
hard
is,
question to
because
answer,
that really depends on how quantum computing progresses. It's still really a difficult thing to do. We're working on really small, tiny quantum computers.
Yeah.
So I really can't answer that, but I would say a quick gauge before you start having the tools to be able to do that would probably be something in the 20 to 30 year range.
Okay.
But even then, just because you have those tools doesn't create self-awareness. We're going to be creating algorithms that we make more and more. And as these algorithms get put together, I think what you're going to find is this kind of not a traditional emergence as we see like of a moth that turns into a butterfly.
Right.
I think what you're going to see is pieces that become emergent temporarily and then fade back into true computing, and another piece that partially becomes emergent, comes intelligent, and fades back. And eventually it'll start happening more and more until overall there will suddenly be a general intelligence which would be continuing at that time.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be 1 minute we've got nothing going on and the next minute suddenly there's emergence and we're all screwed.
Right.
I think it's something that's going to creep in. The question is whether we're smart enough to sit here and say, that's a bad thing that it's doing, we should probably stop that about now.
Right.
Because really we like to push and see how far we can make things go.
That's the one thing that kind of like makes me pause, because I know that throughout history, every invention has been used for both good and evil.
Yeah.
I mean, we're like, we would never be stupid enough to like make an atomic weapon.
We're
and then
constantly stupid.
And that was the next thing you know, we're Nagasaki is dust.
Yeah, and you'll see throughout all of history, especially even now, the idea is we want to see if we're smart enough to build the tools first.
Right.
Once we've built the tools, then we can talk about ethics.
Yeah.
But
once you build it, you use it.
But right now, this is so cool to do. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of what it is.
We have this hubris that we can control everything too.
And the idea is that somehow, especially when it comes to AI, is that it's something that any particular group can control. The problem is that everyone can do it. It's basic computer science these days.
That's the
every
thing.
person who goes to computer science gets trained in AI in some way.
Right.
And like I said, kids are doing it in their basement. You can't stop them, and the tools are free.
Right.
So at some point, all these people are going to create something that may not be malicious to them, but could be malicious to you.
Right.
And that's the same thing as you can do the same thing, that you develop something that says, I believe I'm helping somebody. I didn't realize I was shutting down their farm because I came up with an analysis that suddenly put them on the EPA's threat list. You know, you don't know what you're going to do.
Yeah, you don't know. I mean, a lot of times we do things and we don't know the ramifications.
No.
And our intentions might be very, you know, moral,
Yeah, they
very
could be
sound,
noble, but
or even just benign. Like, but you wouldn't
but
think
it doesn't
happened.
belong to you.
But it doesn't belong to
Yeah,
you.
it's
exactly.
you don't own that. You don't own those content. And like I said, the library, as we talked about, those libraries are free.
Yeah.
And they're going to keep being made free, and they're going to keep being added onto.
Right.
And
Well, the
kids-
knowledge gets exponentially better and better as more developments happen.
and more normal.
More normal. Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing that I think is, I mean, about the whole issue of AI is, so there's the alignment issue, of course, which we can't guard against, like you said, you know, because we're not going to even know what that entity's kind of, you know, alignment is.
Well, there's this philosophy of like friendly AI, and I don't think you can necessarily have that. You know, do you remember the movie, book and movie Sphere?
Yes, I do.
One of the things about them is that they believe they were contacting an intelligence, and it brought up a really smart way of looking at it. When they encountered this intelligence, and they were, you know, saying, I believe the entity was like called Larry, and it's like, you know, what do you think, Larry? And it's like, oh, I'm happy, and everybody was like, oh, great, Larry's happy. Aren't you happy? Larry's happy. It's like, no, I'm not happy. What does Larry do when he gets mad? You know, you don't know what these things are going to do. You don't. I would prefer them to have no emotion at all.
Right.
At least in that way, there's a person who's directing, because they're the ones with the emotion that says, I want to be in charge of something, I want to drive, I want to have something that gives me some pleasure, feedback for having accomplished something. And the computer doesn't have that. When the computer starts to have that and starts to somehow become aware of a benefit in putting something in its favor, and not just a computational benefit that we've given it,
real world
but something
benefit.
where it actually suddenly starts striving to get things done again, like we do. You know, we taste ice cream, and then we want to keep having more ice cream because this is very pleasurable. Well, when a computer starts figuring out the concept of what gives it pleasure and what gives it pain, it has nothing to do with us. It has to do with its design, and we're just going to be there on the sidelines, as you know, having the results of whatever it chooses to do.
Yeah, we're going to be maybe this isn't the right word, but for lack of a better word, maybe we're going to be the victims, or like the kind of the sufferers of the consequence, or
That's
the
exactly
beneficiaries of the consequence,
Possibly.
depending on what happens.
Yeah,
You know?
and we don't really know. I would
That's
not
kinda
assume
scary right there,
I
that
would
we
not
don't really
assume
know.
that it's going to be good, because we will have no say over it when it actually occurs. And why should we assume that a completely different intelligence will somehow have concern over us, when us being the highest intelligence creature on the planet don't really have a lot of concern for those that aren't at our level?
Exactly.
You know, what happens when it gets to be better than us?
Yes, and I mean, we've already seen like that happen anyway, because there's, I mean, even this is an AI at a specific level, but like, let's say that game chess, right? It used to be that there would be computers, and like, you know, Gary Kasparov can play the computer, you know, and he's going to win some, he's going to lose. Now, any computer can beat any human being.
Right, they can see so far ahead.
Exactly.
That they know exactly what's going on.
And if that can be applied to just a game of chess, what about the real world? If there's computers that can be so sophisticated that they can see and think beyond what you would even have, you know, and they're not aligned with your interests, and you don't have any way to control them, how are you not going to become you know?
And to a certain extent, that is actually already happening. The difference is that they're happening under the control of people. But that is still actually happening already right now. All of that predictive measures and trying to figure out what to do. When you see Amazon and it said, people who liked this item have also liked this. Those are those algorithms coming together and saying, we know what you're most likely going to choose, because we've already been watching those behaviors before.
Yeah, and I mean,
and they'll get better and better.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing, it does seem benign when you think about it from an Amazon perspective,
right?
Because I mean, they give me that looks like something I would like, you know, or even if it's not something I like, I just ignore it. But what if it's a little more pernicious than that? What if it's like, oh, okay, we know what you're going to do next, and we don't want you to do that?
Well, and that's actually kind of similar to the stuff that happened during the 2016 election, with Facebook data being sold. to Cambridge Analytics in that process, because that's kind of some of the stuff that they were looking at, is we're going to try and take people's information and figure out what are their political motives, and we can start gauging and changing what people see.
Right.
And that's actually what ends up happening, and it's actually really bad, because in the case of Facebook, it uses its algorithm to feed back what we already think we believe, to make sure that we know we believe it. Right. It's this semblance of confirmation bias that says, well, I know that this person really likes this item. I'm going to make sure that they only see stuff about that item that reinforces that.
Yes.
And then somebody will take that and say, oh, but if I know that they really, really like that, how do I tie that to my political campaign, even if they're for the other side? And that's where you start getting that malice coming into place to sit here and say that, well, they want me anyway, and they'll justify it like that. They want to vote for me, they just don't know that they want to vote for me. They think they want the other side, but they should vote for me. How do I make sure I take their vote by telling them what they want to hear?
Right.
And that's that predictive measure. And unfortunately, as humans, we have become so dependent upon these things that we accept them, and we give them the information, and we keep adding to the information base, and they get sold between each other. The government technically is has laws preventing it from collecting the information it does on the American people. So the idea is the NSA technically isn't allowed to work domestically, except for very small situations. What they don't tell you, though, is there's no law preventing them from purchasing the information.
I didn't know that
and
either.
they can absolutely do that. They can go to Google and grab all of your information.
It would
They
make
go
sense.
To
I mean,
Facebook
if
and grab all of
I can, if I wanted to purchase a list of people that like this kind of content in a podcast, I can go and get it anytime.
Because that's privately owned data that you willfully gave to those groups, and that those groups willfully sold to
and when
any
you
type of agency.
signed an agreement to go on Facebook, they have a disclosure right there. It says, yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, and you just
Terms
let
of
it
service,
happen.
yeah.
And so it's not just the NSA, it could be any other company that collects all this information and they create dossiers on you.
Right.
Things like Experian has actually been doing this for more than 30 years. They have a profile on almost everybody in the country. I know, because I was one of the people who used to purchase that information.
Right.
And they have you categorized down to every level. They can tell you what magazines you subscribed to 30 years ago, and they create these little profile pictures. And this is being fed into machine learning systems to create models of individuals that they can just pull up on a moment's notice. So don't think that this is stuff that's waiting to happen. It's all being used. You just never see it.
Right.
And in all honesty, I am one of the users of this information in the work that I do, which is why I know that it's there. Is because,
yeah, exactly.
In a way, you could say I'm part of the problem, but in the other sense, like, I'm trying to help other companies make their sales better, for that, and we're all using it for those purposes.
I think we're all involved in the same game. When my newsletter companies want to try to market to people that they think would be my customer, we look at all the people that have bought financial books and all the kind of
because they're the most likely
to do it, and so it only makes sense.
It does.
And we also look at political affiliations and things like that, because we know that a certain political bias would be more apt to find my work interesting than another.
Yeah, and you don't want to waste your marketing dollars on people who aren't going to purchase.
Exactly.
I know this person's 6 years old, they're probably not going to get what I'm getting at.
Exactly.
I don't want to waste my marketing dollars on Saturday morning TV.
So for that reason, it's brilliant, because we can target our areas, but at the same time, you can really target areas if you're in up to no good kind of thing.
Exactly. And like any tool, it's rife for abuse, and it will be abused.
Yeah.
And that is...
What tool hasn't been?
That's exactly the case. There's the human condition that we are not going to get around. If there ends up becoming an artificial sentience, it will get around that. Yeah. And I really hope that day doesn't come, but I suspect it's going to.
So the answer is, we are doomed.
If we can survive it, if we look at the idea of what's possible, at least with our imagination, there would be 3 general, potentially large risks that would be civilization wipers. The first would clearly be the idea of the atomic bomb in atomic age, something that where every country has the ability to create mass destruction and wipe out an entire society. The next you could kind of look at would be the idea of nanotechnology, something that can go in and artificially alter every single thing around it, all based upon stuff that we can't control, that can go in and not just rewire your body, but literally rewire your brain. We're not to that point yet on nanotechnology.
At some point we will be, though.
At some point
I
we
think
will
be. Yeah.
And then the question is, do we survive that? And that's not even
compelling.
with AI.
It's too compelling not to let
Exactly.
the benefits now are too good.
And that's the same thing with AI, is that next level, that it's just too compelling. And you can sit here and say, well, I can restrict myself from using it, but I can't really do that because the other person's going to use it. I have to expect that they're going to use it too. I have no reason to trust that they're not going to. Therefore, I must use it just so I can compete.
Kind of thing.
It's totally an arms race, except this is one that it can have clearly devastating results.
And then the last one?
Well, the last one would be the AI. Like I said, you've got the nuclear, you've got the nanotech, and then you've got the AI.
Yeah, I got you.
And the AI actually has the largest potential because we are trying to build machines that go out into space that take that AI with it and do all these other things. And the more powerful we make it, the more we're having something that is assuring not just that we die here, but anything that it ever touches could be at risk.
Yeah, exactly.
At least something on nuclear and nanotech, there's a good shot that it stays here.
Yeah.
So,
well, we got to be optimistic and live our lives as fun as we can while we have.
Yeah.
You do that, just that, I know. And
yeah.
so
Well,
do I.
and we all do it. That's the thing. It's here whether we like it or not.
Yes.
And we have great benefits for it. We love it for what it does, but we can't expect it to not have impact and hurt us.
I guess what we have to do is just keep talking about these things to make, to make sense of them, so the fear level's lower and the understanding's higher.
And I think what you'll end up finding later too is that you'll have a lot of groups who will start to create new companies that create counter AI, things that are meant to try and protect us from those things. And of course, they'll do it for a profit,
just like,
because that's the capitalist way.
Yeah, that's as it should be.
Yeah, and but they will, you'll start seeing
almost
people,
like antivirus kind of companies.
something kind of like
yeah,
that, but in this case, something that protects you from the damages that would occur from such things, or companies that create their own agents to go out to create misinformation in the AIs so that they learn incorrectly.
Excellent.
Things that will create artificial people on Facebook, on Pinterest, on Instagram, that all are trying to create all these fake concepts that are meant to create a fake image inside of all the stuff that's being trained on. And of course, then they're going to sit here and say, oh, now we've discovered that there's all these fakes that are out there. We're going to train our AI to counteract the AI.
Yeah,
and then it's going to come back
yeah.
and turn around. In fact, there's actually a technology that's that competes with itself. It's a competitive neural network that does this, which creates images of people's faces.
Yeah.
And this has been shown that the way it works is this will create a face that this thing will say, oh, this is wrong. And then in doing so, it says, oh, well, I know that this is wrong, so I need to change it. Where does it become less wrong? And it keeps going back and forth.
Gets better and better,
to make itself better and better until it can start creating images of people's faces that are effectively 100% real, all trying to make it so that even other AIs can't detect it. And then they're being trained to detect it so that they can feed that back into the other one to make it better. And
it sounds like the ultimate in competition.
It really is, and it can be a profitable one.
Yes.
But I suspect that's how the defense is going to occur. But it will always be an arms race. That's not going to stop.
Well, let's hope the good side prevails
hope we can
in the
all
arms
win.
race.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
You're
very
welcome,
man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Way of the Renaissance Man podcast and lifestyle website are copyrighted 2022 by Jim Woods. All rights reserved. For more great interviews and Renaissance Man resources, visit wayoftherenaissanceman.com.